All right, everybody out there in Radio Land, welcome to episode 6 of The Left Unsaid, the podcast where we smash our fists through the glass of official narratives and grab all the shiny new insights we can carry, redistributing them to the masses. We have reached episode 6.
All right.
Woo. It's crazy. I mean, this is going, it's swimmingly. We actually added a new thing.
What's our new thing?
Everybody's got headphones on.
Yeah. We're very technologically advanced here. Patrick has a tendency to collect cords, and it turns out that it was worthwhile hoarding all the black cords and
hoarding. Yeah, this has been a hoarder's paradise, like a hoarder's dream. This is what the hoarder imagines will happen, is that you'll suddenly have a need to like become world famous on a podcast, and you'll just like piece together these little tidbits that are just all hanging out in a drawer for years and years and years.
That's right. Some of this stuff is probably 15 years old.
Maybe we should take a picture of this nest of
wires,
hodgepodge wires. You know, this is like, I'm sort of like the early computers, you know, where they just kind of were like, well, let's plug this into that.
Yeah.
Although I think they had a plan. I don't know. Maybe they did. Welcome to episode 6. We are so glad to be joining you. We had a little uptick of people listening to us on YouTube. All of 40 people listened, or there were 40 streams, whatever that means. If you know what it means, leave it in the comments. We'd love to know how the podcast is doing.
And
just
again,
as much as you would.
If you go to the leftunsaid.net, there's a little yellow microphone button that you can click. You can record a question for us, an observation. We would love to bring our listeners into this conversation. We love this part because we get to sit down and have the kind of conversations that we would normally have in our house. And we just want to invite as many people to be part of that as possible.
That's right.
So yeah, the leftunsaid.net, click on the little yellow microphone button and leave us a message.
And while you're at it, leave us a review or a comment on any other platform you want, because we know the little machines that run our lives love that kind of thing.
They do.
Just tell them, my eyeballs are glued to your platform because of the Left Unsaid. And that's how we are going to take over the world.
The Left Unsaid
together.
Is also, now I will say, on Instagram.
Yeah, we're on Instagram. That's right.
Yeah, so
this is... At the leftunsaid.pod.
.pod, okay.
There's a band that I haven't yet listened to that was called The Left Unsaid, and I think they own the
really?
Left Unsaid.
Okay.
So maybe they'll become fans of the podcast and they'll give up their intellectual property to us. I mean, that's a wonderful donation out there. Just for anybody listening, if you do have intellectual property, we will accept it.
All right, so we're all here today. Patrick, jibber jabbering over there.
Hey.
He's the erstwhile historian and your favorite down-home Irish storyteller. And I'm Meg, and I'm the mom around here. And
well,
actually,
you're more than the mom.
Yeah, I do a lot of things. And Finn, who appears to be cramming over on the couch here, just getting some more information into this amazing 16-year-old brain of his. It's nice
newly
to be
16,
here.
pretty
newly
recently
16. Happy birthday, Finn.
Thank you.
I mean, not that. We're past really, like, don't write in and say happy birthday because you'd be too late. But it's pretty recent.
No, I would appreciate it. You can still write in.
So can I just start off with what I feel like is the most bizarre news of the week?
Please. Okay.
The Washington Post the other day said that the guy who did Duck Dynasty and the Department of Homeland Security.
I love how you say the guy who did Duck Dynasty.
I don't know. So
like you've seen it.
I haven't. You reminded me that this is the guy. I don't really watch television or...
I don't know what that is.
Oh,
I've
you
never
don't know
watched
what that
it either.
is.
So welcome to The Left Unsaid, where we talk about things we know nothing about.
I do know that Duck Dynasty is a reality TV show, kind of
so.
like Survivor. I mean, I did watch
right.
some
element
Survivor
of elimination
when it first came out. I'm intellectually at least aware of the genre. And so the news is that Department of Homeland Security and whatever this dude's name who did the Duck Dynasty,
the guy,
yeah, are in conversation about a reality TV show concept where undocumented immigrants compete for citizenship.
So deeply sick.
Oh my gosh.
The guy must be the worst guy. We'll call him the bad guy.
These people read the Hunger Games and sided with President Snow.
Oh, God.
Ooh, zing.
Yeah, it's like the Truman Show mashed up with Survivor, mashed up with Nazis, I guess, right?
Oh.
I mean, imagine, it's like, what would the Nazis cook up in this day and age? Ooh, somebody should make a sci-fi about that. I like any sci-fi where you take the Nazis and you imagine, like, what if? I mean, I don't love it in real life as much.
Yeah.
Pretty sick. Do you think it's real? Do you think this is like a real idea? Sometimes they're throwing weird red meat to their base.
Look, Trump is a reality TV show guy.
True.
I really don't doubt it. It honestly tracks.
It's like he's just turning the whole world into reality TV. It's like we're living in... I'm going to go way off on a weird tangent.
Go for it, babe.
But there's this French philosopher. His name is Baudrillard. Which is that way my French has gotten so bad. We traveled.
We met
through
in
France
French class. Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't say the same sentence. I thought we were going to say the same sentence there, but you said one and I said like a different one. So no one will know what we said. But we did meet in French class. And anyway, I didn't meet this guy. I've heard about him since this. But there's this French philosopher who has this whole idea of like the simulacra, meaning like a simulation or something, a fancy word for simulation. But the idea is that like we have the physical world we inhabit, but then on the basis of our physical world, using various instruments like the microphones that we have stuck in front of our faces right now, we create a simulation of the world through like various representations like videos and photos, like all of our Instagram accounts.
Simulacra.
Because, and if you get to know the person, you realize, oh, like they're not always making delicious omelets.
or like in my case, oh, she doesn't always, wear these cute clothes that she sews. She mostly is just in grungy sweatshirts and like old T-shirts and whatnot.
For those who don't know out there, I can't imagine who you are. If you've lived under a rock for the last 50 years, Meg is the founder and designer of So Liberated.
Yes, I am.
Which is a sewing pattern company that we run. That's our actual job. And this is our hobby. Yeah, I was thinking about this. It's sort of like my version of a middle-aged man playing with trains in the basement.
Listen, if each of you listening can chip in at least $50,000, we might be able to make this our full-time gig.
Looking at you, Ben. So this French philosopher, Baudrillard, whose name I can't really pronounce, we'll just call him Baudrillard, he has this idea of the simulacra. So the idea is that you have all these representations. That's not that interesting, right? Like, yeah, we all know we got videos and photos and stuff. But the thing is, those representations that we create then in sort of the cyclical process become our reality or change our reality because we seek to imitate the things that we see.
I mean, this is people are studying this phenomenon. The idea of the trad wife, right? This sort of like and a pressure that mothers feel watching these mothers who have these beautiful lives and, they cook these amazing meals and all of their children are well dressed and well behaved at all times. By imbibing this simulacra, you as a mother, that's your ideal, right? You try to incorporate all this information you're seeing online into your own life.
And it can be good. It can be bad, right? Like it can be good because you've got great ideas on what to do with the kids. Like I remember, Meg, you used to have this wonderful sensorial table where you could put like flour just wastefully all over the table and the kids could like put their little chubby fingers in there. And the idea was that later, if they do this, if they feel that flour, then one day they'll make a podcast about politics that will get them banned from every future employment they might have ever had a chance at.
Thanks, guys.
But on the other hand, it can make you feel kind of inadequate, right?
Right.
When that's the struggle we're all going through. And I think this idea, like if you really take it and you start interpreting things through the lens of simulacra, like so many things can fall into this. Like the idea of a nation that because we're Americans, it means something. Well, that's like a narrative that was constructed and maintained, every time you go to a football game and they cover the field in a flag or whatever it is. The enactment of cheering for your sports team. et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We're enacting things that come to us through the simulacra. And then in the end, we're so involved in that that you can't really pull apart what's real and what's simulated. They merge. That's what we're living in.
Yeah.
The reality TV is now reality, and maybe they never were separate. So that's it. Maybe we should just do a podcast on like weird, depressing existentialism.
What do you think, Finn?
He wasn't listening. So it turns out that news is breaking all around us, and Finn is our very assiduous reporter over here. He's keeping up to date with what's happening down to the minute that we're recording this podcast. And it really is happening like crazy. I feel like this is the kind of time period where centuries are happening in weeks.
Absolutely.
The earth is shifting around us. It's like the political equivalent of an earthquake that we're all living through. So yeah, what do you got, Finn? What is happening right now? Are you ready to talk?
Yeah, well, recently one of the stories that's kind of made its way into the mainstream news is Hasan, who's a streamer, which for you old folks out there, Twitch streamer, it's basically like a podcast, but way longer.
This is a real word, this Twitch streaming
Yes,
thing?
yes, it is.
I think we were sort of visualizing people like, actually twitching and maybe like a little river alongside them.
Oh, God. Meg, put the joke book down. We're doing a podcast.
These streamers are a huge way in which young people consume their news. It's people like Asmongold, like even, Joe Rogan, although known for the podcast space, gets a lot of his audience from the streamer ecosystem. So Hasan, he's one of the leading left-wing streamer, left-wing personality. And he recently was on a trip and he got detained by Homeland Security in an airport.
Was it at the border?
Correct. Flying in from France, I believe.
Yes. And, this is just really unprecedented. The things he says, they asked him, do you support Hamas? Obviously, this was like a targeted thing. They knew who he was before they detained him. They also asked him, have you ever interviewed a member of Hamas or Hezbollah or the Houthis? And this is, a very, very strange thing for Border Patrol to be asking someone who is a journalist and functions like a journalist, after he had a conversation with Jeremy Scahill.
Well, Jeremy Scahill, famed reporter. I remember when he was a young reporter at Democracy Now!, but founder of The Intercept and now founder of Drop Site News, fantastic source for news that I recommend everybody check out.
Yeah, and Hasan and Jeremy were talking about, this is obviously an intimidation tactic that's trying to be used by Homeland Security to equate, actual journalism to material support for terrorism, which in the United States is a crime and you can go to jail for that. But it's important that we stand up against this criminalization of free press. The terrorism watch list in the United States has long been used to suppress dissent and silence the press. For example, Jeremy Scahill himself was on the terrorism watch list under Obama for the reporting he was doing on some of Obama's drone strikes. These agents were clearly trying to get him to slip up and say something. Hasan has all these resources at his disposal. He's a public figure, so he felt confident kind of like continuing and asking these questions. But, if a regular person like you or me got detained at an airport, then the best thing to do is to say, I want to talk to a lawyer, only answer basic information about yourself. Don't answer anything outside of that without talking to a lawyer.
Like very basic information, like where are you coming from and where are you going? Where do you work? Who are you?
Yeah.
Kinds of things. But if they ask you about your political opinion, and I think maybe it's important to say, if you're a U.S. citizen, then you don't need to answer. You should say you want to talk to a lawyer. If they ask you to open your phone, you don't have to let them do that. You can be very confrontational as a U.S. citizen. If you're not a U.S. citizen and this happens to you and you get detained at the border, that advice is probably not the best, because if you get confrontational with them, they can deport you. You can get in real trouble. And so you're in a more difficult bind, I think, as a non-citizen, because they have like, going through an airport, it's like you're going through this not lawless, it's like overlawed, where the state doesn't have the same restraints that it has inside the country. Like basically the courts have allowed.
Yeah, it's like the Wild West of enforcement.
Yeah, of the state. The state is just like it's a predator. It's unchained, stalking through the airport.
Yeah, I understand. It's the state's position that the Constitution doesn't apply, basically, when you're in an airport. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's something like that. You're like in some form of Guantanamo Bay at that point. Not the beautiful Guantanamo Bay of Cuba, but the prison, the black hole site that the U.S. constructed during the war in Afghanistan and maintains.
So yeah, what do you guys make of this apprehending of, this is one prominent example, but this is happening regularly at airports across the United States. What do you make of this story?
Well, I think probably we should stop podcasting.
Well, it's been great seeing y'all. If you've downloaded one of these episodes, delete it. Do whatever. I'm not sure it's defragging your hard drive, but just destroy the hard drive, please. No, I mean, yeah, they're definitely trying to intimidate.
But look, this has happened before.
Absolutely.
McCarthyism, the Red Scare.
And we have tools to fight back that they didn't have then.
Right.
What tools do we have?
The internet.
Podcasts, Twitter. I mean, I'm not claiming like they aren't trying to take control of the tools, like they're trying to shut down TikTok. And I think a lot of that is because they recognize the power of the ability to do a runaround of the official narratives. Those of us who can stand up and refuse to be cowed, refuse to throw Palestinians under the bus, refuse to let them define the terms of the debate, we should be doing it just to connect to each other and say, hey, you're not crazy, as this like Orwellian thing falls down over us. If we just keep on repeating the memories, repeating the truth, well, they can't like rewrite the history and rewrite the present.
Speaking of conforming to the other side's terms of debate, Britain is having an interesting time over there. We're talking about America a lot. There's some pretty crazy things happening here, but Britain has, if people don't know, they have a Labour government in power. That's like the equivalent to the Democrats here. And the Prime Minister of Britain currently is Keir Starmer. He's a member of the Labour Party. And I'd like to just read a couple of his most recent tweets out to you. He says, "Foreign criminals have no right to be in Britain." He says, "For too long, Britain has been addicted to cheap overseas labor. I'm putting our young people first." He says, "Strengthen our borders. If you work here illegally or employ people who do, we're coming for you. Illegal working raids are up 40%, and we won't stop there."
We're coming for you.
Sounds familiar. Look, in this house, we don't worship at the feet of the British. For those of you who haven't listened to previous podcasts, Patrick's a bit Irish.
I'm a little Irish.
We'll have to link to that analysis of the Irish step dancing. That little.
I'm a bit of a skedaddler. That's true. Yeah, we don't. But we know at the same time we don't caricature them as villains, which I don't understand where they're coming from. And yeah, this is a particularly disturbing echo of Trumpian discourse, which itself is a particularly disturbing echo of some of the anti-immigration European discourse, which is in turn, it goes back and forth.
Yeah. It also shows what happens when you take capitulation to the extreme on these issues. We saw Kamala Harris, for example, was running a campaign and she was capitulating to the premise that, immigration is bad, immigrants are bad, and that she would be like strong against it for the most part. And Keir Starmer is clearly doing an elevated version of that. He's basically trying to out-fascist the fascists. But it doesn't work. These people have made a calculation that they're going to win over all of these conservative voters by being more tough on immigration or crime or whatever else than the conservatives themselves are. But it's wrong. I'll read to you a comment on one of Keir Starmer's tweets, and this person says, "Keir Starmer suddenly playing border enforcer after years of waving them in, handing out hotel keys, and branding anyone who objected a xenophobe."
Yeah, so that person's
not
buying
changing
it.
any minds.
Yeah, he's not changing any minds. basically just makes it seem like you've been lying to the public for, years, and then suddenly you're like, oh yeah, sorry guys, I was wrong, the other guy's right.
Right. It reads as wishy-washy.
And it cedes the ground to the other side, the ground on which they win. And you're saying, oh yeah, they've been right all along, so I'll do like a weak-kneed version of what they're saying we needed, and they were right all along. Like, that doesn't work.
Yeah, you're not going to be a guy who's been, xenophobic for 10 years if you're just starting now.
And look, as we touched upon in episode number 5, this is all built on lies. This idea that immigrants bring in more crime, this idea that they're taking the jobs of young people, like Keir Starmer says, it's just false.
And I think it remains important then to counterpose a universalist, humanist idea. Look, we can have borders that have some controls. I'm not against the idea of borders. I think we've been clear, like in our episode on India, Pakistan. Go check it out. We said your borders are showing. That's the name of the episode. But borders play a role in the modern nation state of creating peace between what were formerly like empires with permeable borders where you could never tell where one started and what ended, which led to a lot of conflict. I'm not saying I'm against having some system of borders. I don't know what the alternative to that would be, but you can have borders and allow migration across those borders and have a human-centered view of the world, even among nation states. And we got to keep making the case for that. Like, Latin Americans are not our enemies. They're our neighbors. They're our friends. They teach us things. They bring richness into our lives that we would otherwise not have.
Absolutely.
Same thing is true for Africans. Like, that universalist vision of the world has got to continue to be articulated. And I find it so disheartening and sad when, like, even in the New York Times, which is sort of like the closest powerful voice, like voice of the establishment that comes closest to being on the left in some ways, but it can just be so anti-immigrant and have the comment section just filled with people saying, yeah, I said throw them out years ago. The Democrats are finally getting it right, when they're ceding the ground to the Republicans anyway in these elections. And so it doesn't even win the election in the short term, but that's so short term. Like, winning an election on the scale of history is just so short term and so short-sighted. Like, we shouldn't give up this argument, because what I fear is, like, we're going to become a world where borders define, or maybe have become a world where borders define who lives and who dies. And as everyone's sort of anticipating that we're entering a world in which climate change has created ecocide, where whole ecosystems are falling, and there's going to be migration because there's going to be changes on where human life can thrive. The rich countries that are responsible for all that are going to have hardened their borders to the movement of people, and also normalized the bombing of people inside those borders. Like, we have that hard border drawn around Gaza.
Right.
And you can just dump bombs in there, and some people get really rich on it. Like, that guy in Palantir can sit there in front of his board of directors and just crow about how much money he's making on all that weaponry and the artificial intelligence that targets it, et cetera, et cetera. That's a terrible world.
That's a terrible world.
And I fear that that's what this looks like, the hardening of the border and the hardening of the hearts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, just for a moment, let's step back and soften our hearts a bit. I don't know, Finn, you've heard of her, Miss Rachel.
Yeah, definitely.
And this is not someone who you watched, Finn, as a little one. So Miss Rachel is, those of you who are my age, think about how important Mr. Rogers was sort of in our development of empathy and just, he zipped up that cardigan and we felt seen, and we saw him washing the feet of his black postman in a time when that was sort of, unheard of or at least unwitnessed on public television. What a fabulous human being he was, and how he allowed us to really see the humanity and all the guests he brought on, all the things he does, the way that he wrote his songs. I almost get teary to thinking about it. I really wish Mr. Rogers was around right now, like you can imagine him, being up there and in front of Congress and testifying like he did back then to defend PBS and his programming. And you can imagine that being of great use now.
So this is Mr. Rogers testifying before the Senate back in 1969. this senator was opposed to funding PBS.
All right, Rogers, you got the floor.
That's the guy. All right, Rogers, you got the floor. That's the senator he's trying to convince.
Senator Pastore, I'm very much concerned, as I know you are, about what's being delivered to our children in this country. And I've worked in the field of child development for 6 years now, trying to understand the inner needs of children. We deal with such things as the inner drama of childhood. We deal with such things as getting a haircut, or the feelings about brothers and sisters, and the kind of anger that arises in simple family situations. And we speak to it constructively.
How long a program is it?
It's a half hour every day.
Could we get a copy of this so that we can see it? Maybe not today, but I'd like to see the program.
I'd like very much for you
I'd like to see the program itself, or any one of them, you see.
Yeah, I mean, so now you see how he's like won him over at this point. It's almost hard for me not to be cynical, having seen the way in which so much reality TV shows sort of manipulates this skepticism and then being converted over. But I think this was an example of an actual conversion.
We've got to have more of this neighborhood expression of care. This is what I give. I give an expression of care every day to each child to help him realize that he is unique. I end the program by saying, you've made this day a special day by just your being you. There's no person in the whole world like you, and I like you just the way you are. I think that it's much more dramatic that two men could be working out their feelings of anger. Much more dramatic than showing something of gunfire.
Do you narrate it?
I'm the host, yes. And I do all the puppets, and I write all the music, and I write all the script.
Well, I'm supposed to be a pretty tough guy, and this is the first time I've had goosebumps for the last 2 days.
Well, I'm grateful, not only for your goosebumps, but for your interest in our kind of communication. Could I tell you the words of one of the songs which I feel is very important?
Yes.
This has to do with that good feeling of control, which I feel that children need to know is there. And it starts out, what do you do with the mad that you feel? And that first line came straight from a child. When you feel so mad you could bite. When the whole wide world seems oh so wrong, and nothing you do seems very right. What do you do? Do you punch a bag? Do you pound some clay or some dough? Do you round up friends for a game of tag or see how fast you go? It's great to be able to stop when you've planned a thing that's wrong and be able to do something else instead and think this song. I can stop when I want to, can stop when I wish, can stop, stop, stop anytime. And what a good feeling to feel like this and know that the feeling is really mine. Know that there's something deep inside that helps us become what we can. For a girl can be someday a lady, and a boy can be someday a man.
I think it's wonderful. I think it's wonderful. Looks like you just earned the $20 million.
Yeah, so Mr. Rogers.
Object lesson in how to turn a room, huh?
Right, right. But back to Miss Rachel, she's taking up the banner of Mr. Rogers. And in the same way that he clearly, like in his very being, cares about children, all children, she has that. She's a YouTube personality. She has her little show. Like Mr. Rogers zips up his cardigan, she has a pair of overalls on and a pink T-shirt and, you know, a little kerchief in her hair. And she has come out as supporting children and supporting the children of Palestine. And she's received a lot of blowback from that.
And it's remarkable because she's a personality on the internet who's not inherently political, and she's seeing this as an urgent moral crisis. And so I think to use her platform to then bring this important human catastrophe to a wider audience is a brave act, what the moment calls for.
You know, I've experienced a little bit, just a small bit of that in the admittedly sort of light touch I've had on human dignity and almost like not saying it outright, but insinuating that I truly do care about people, you know, the people of Palestine on my business website, right? In the sewing, crafting world. Most people are very supportive when I talk about this stuff, but, you know, there's one or two folks who have, you know, in the past basically said, stay in your lane. I don't want to come here. I don't want to see politics. By politics, they mean standing up for human dignity. I don't want to see that in my crafting feed. You know, and so she's having blowback in this way that, you know, hey, like kind of like a stay in your lane way, and also just flat out accusing her of being anti-Semitic.
And it's incredible, right? The stuff she's posting is like, all children deserve to live. And then you have like the Zionists being like, no, that's anti-Semitic. No, they don't. You're covering for Hamas. Do they deserve to live when Hamas is hiding behind them? Like, It's just wild to see just the blatant disregard for the basic principles of humanity displayed by some of these like ultra pro-Israel people online.
Yeah, and they sort of say, oh, you only care about Palestinian children, which is demonstrably not true. She clearly cares about children. She has done segments on the Bibis family, the children from Israel who were taken captive and died in Gaza. She's done more on Palestinian children, which is overwhelmingly supported by what's happening. I mean, Palestinian children are dying in just such greater numbers. I mean, if she were to proportionally spread out her attention to Palestinian children and Israeli children based on how much they're suffering, how much they're being killed, how much they're being maimed, I mean, she would, I think, never be able to do enough episodes on Palestinian children if she did even one on Israeli children. So it's just so gross to accuse her of this. And then they're also saying, there's groups out there saying, well, is she being funded by Hamas? It needs to be investigated whether she's being funded by a terrorist group. Just sickening stuff. I've got a prediction, though. I think because she's expressing the core values of humanity, humanity will respond. And while we all have fear, and I get it, we have fear of speaking out on this issue, especially because it divides us from people who we have been allies with in so many other fights. It turns out that some of the people that we trust and that we have loved and we continue to love, because we continue to love all people, right, are Zionists and are blinding themselves to the reality of this just horrific genocide that's happening. So just kudos to Miss Rachel, just amazing.
Right.
And like this attempt to smear her by saying, oh, you know, she's connected to Hamas is so similar to the attempt we were talking about before with Hasan and Jeremy Scahill as reporters interviewing people from Hamas. I don't even think Hasan has done that, but Jeremy Scahill has. He thinks it's very important to go around and interview the leaders of groups like the Houthis in Yemen, like Hezbollah, like Hamas, because it turns out if you talk to them, they have real content to their political beliefs. For example, Hamas is treated like a completely irrational actor in the world. But in fact, Hamas has got a charter. They have goals. They negotiate. They have never taken part in any kind of attack outside the borders of what they see as Palestine. We can absolutely, and we should, have conversations about whether some of the tactics that Hamas has used in what is essentially an armed resistance movement are moral and legitimate. We should be having those conversations. But instead, we're not even allowed to get to the point where we have those tactical conversations because everyone is always asked to deny the right of Palestinians to resist occupation, to resist the constant bombardment, to resist the siege, the fact that they're locked in, that no aid is coming in. It turns out when you go talk to these people, they have positions that can be reasoned with. And recently, the Trump administration discovered this. One of the silver linings of the Trump administration is that they're bringing people in to international negotiations who have never been part of them before, who didn't come up in the State Department, who aren't sort of swimming in all of the lies and self-depictions that the foreign policy establishment of the United States has had over the decades and decades.
Precedents.
So you got that guy, Steve Witkoff. Well, what's Steve Witkoff's credentials? He golfs with Trump. And he goes over and he just starts saying, he just starts treating it like it's a business deal and he's got the upper hand and he just starts telling people what to do. And sometimes they just wildly do things that nobody from the State Department would have ever dreamed of doing.
For example, one of these long-standing traditions, you might call it, that this foreign policy elite tends to have is we don't negotiate with terrorists, which means, the United States doesn't engage in direct talks with people and actors on the global stage who they disagree with.
Yeah, who they call terrorists. And like this category is just nonsensical. And by the way, I recently learned that the word terrorist first came up in the U.S. legal context to refer exactly to the Palestinians who were resisting, back when it was a secular resistance under the Palestinian Liberation Organization. So this has been a long thing. And I think also like this trend towards not talking to your enemies has gotten stronger, really starting with like George W. Bush. Before that, I do think, like starting with Nixon in China, for example, like he went and talked to the Chinese and it was like a huge breakthrough moment. And so there have been times where you can talk to your enemies and times where you can't talk to your enemies, more definitely in one of those can't talk to your enemies moment from the State Department. But guess what? You guys remember Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law?
Sure do.
Married to Ivanka Trump. Well, he had a college buddy, and his college buddy must have had like a passing interest in foreign policy or probably, foreign business. And his name's Adam Bowler. Adam Bowler goes over and talks to Hamas, and Israel just loses their minds. The government of Israel is just saying, how can you do this? Because he sort of goes on TV afterwards saying, yeah, they're nothing like what I thought they were going to be. They turned out to be pretty reasonable people.
I will tell you that Hamas did orient toward a long-term truce, as they called it, a truce where they would be disarmed, a truce where they would not be part of the political policy, and a truce where we would ensure that they are in a place where they can't hurt Israel. Dialogue lit means sitting, hearing what someone wants, and then identifying, does it fit with what we want or not? And then how can you get somewhere in the middle and not have a war? And I think those kind of dialogues are very important to the president because, as he constantly says, he doesn't want war. War is a last resort. He wants a peaceful world.
And then Trump bombs the Houthis for a month. Terrible thing to do. Poorest country in the world where the Houthis are, Yemen.
Kills many innocent civilians.
And they've just been bombed by Saudi Arabia using U.S. weapons for years. And they're maybe the only country that is actively doing something to try to bring solidarity with the Palestinians, trying to, what they say that they're doing, and it looks like they're doing, is trying to enforce international law as required by doing what they can to have consequences for the genocide and bombardment of Gaza. So they've said,
trying to prevent shipments to and from Israel.
Because they have to be positioned right by these shipping routes. And so by imposing costs on ships going through there, they're trying to put pressure on Israel. It's exactly what they say they're doing. Anyway, Trump bombed them for 30 days. But then he hears from his generals that it's not working. I mean, the Houthis are just so used to being bombed by Saudi Arabia. They've developed tactics. They bury themselves underground. And while the U.S. was using all kinds of very expensive precision weapons, almost had some of its jets shot down by the Houthis.
And just had a few of its jets fall off the aircraft carrier.
Yeah. Trump, who I think is no fan of forever wars, for whatever reason, while he was presented with all these plans from his generals to go deeper, we're going to go further, we're going to completely annihilate the ability of the Houthis to operate, and all the kinds of things that they will say, and they'll always have these plans for the president. He said, nope, he declared victory, he got out. He didn't even secure an agreement that the Houthis would stop sending weapons towards Israel, because they recently bombed an airport in Israel. They were able to send a missile that went past Israel's air defenses. He didn't even try to get a commitment from the Houthis not to do that.
He just wanted them to stop bombing American ships.
Yeah, and so again, he's acting without Israel at his side and without Israel's permission, which is like unprecedented in the last few decades of U.S. foreign policy.
Yeah, and this also circles back to how important it is for journalists to be able to interview, what are colloquially referred to as terrorists. The Houthis are on the U.S.'s list of terrorist organizations, but Jeremy Scahill and his team at Dropsite News did an interview with a high-ranking Houthi official, and they basically said, we'll stop attacking American ships if they stop bombing us. Our grudge is not with them. We're trying to punish Israel's genocide. And apparently the Trump administration saw that because they weren't talking to them before, and it played a big part in how this deal was created.
So last week we were bringing this up and we were wondering, is it a smokescreen? And again, an example of a week that's actually a century. You have Trump this week flying all around the Middle East, going to Saudi Arabia, to Qatar, to all of the oil-rich countries. Didn't go to Israel, and is talking in a, still a very perverse way, but talking about a deal with Iran. So we got to talk about this vision that is happening through Trump. I mean, I don't, before heaping praise on it, it's got deep traps, but I do want to acknowledge that it's being driven by corruption.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, they've developed, the Trump family now has what is it called? Trump coin? This cryptocurrency?
Something.
And these oil states are agreeing to do transactions in Trump's cryptocurrency because that just, by putting the transaction in there, it gives value to this thing that inherently has no value. It's a cryptocurrency. And allows the bubble to start for Trump and family and just enriching themselves left and right.
You don't get any more blatant than being gifted a $400 million private jet by a Qatari government.
As we've heard, right? So much. I mean, this is the main thing that the New York Times and the liberal press is criticizing him for, is this kind of corruption. But I do think we have to acknowledge this other side and of a certain kind of peace that Trump envisions for the world, envisions for this region. And the peace, I would say, is an oligarchic peace. So peace under oligarchy, peace without justice.
I really think that at the root of any action that Trump takes on the political stage, it's A, how will this enrich me? And B, how will this make me look? How will people perceive me? It's an egomaniacal oligarchy, and it's very much max capitalism. Like Elon Musk has said, stepping back a little bit, I'm going to go to Tesla. My work in Doge is about done. But, he was on this trip with Trump.
And I think it's really an exercise in class solidarity. It's the oligarchs finding each other. And, there's this book that came out 10 years ago that really made an impact on me called Capital in the 21st Century, another French guy, Thomas Piketty. And part of the central question of that book, amazing book, goes back hundreds of years in economic history, pulled data from hundreds of years ago that we never had, found out things like both stocks and land over the long horizon tend to have a return of about 5% over inflation, just so y'all know out there. Get your investing advice alongside your outrage here at the Left Unsaid. And part of the central question of Capital in the 21st Century is, will the returns to inherited wealth just completely swamp the returns to anyone's ability to sort of work themselves up from poverty, say, or from the middle class? Will it destroy the middle class, essentially? It's a vision of the world in which the inequalities that we have just grow and grow and grow and become self-perpetuating, so that the Saudi royal family and the heads of all these Arab oil states become so rich that they become untouchable forever and ever, as well as the billionaires here. And Trump is sort of trying to ensure that his family legacy is to always be part of this billionaire class that gets perpetuated in ever and ever. Amen. And I do feel like that's the form of peace that he envisions. So as long as Iran is quiescent and doesn't cause problems, as long as the Palestinians don't cause problems and they staff the hotels in his imagined Gaza real estate, staff the casinos.
Let's link in the show notes to that AI-generated reel that he put out about Trump Gaza. It's a handful of months ago now.
And maybe we can just conclude. We kind of opened a little bit with Jeremy Scahill. We have to acknowledge some promising developments where the United States foreign policy could become divorced from Israel to a certain degree. I don't want to overstate that, but that's an opening, and it's an opening to which we should be attentive that creates an opening for some kind of change, and we desperately need that because of politics intervening.
I think that we have to be clear-headed about this. I do see a lot in the liberal news media, this sort of outrage at the tactics that he uses, and while I personally find him to be just a disgusting human, I do want to look at it with a bit of equanimity, because a lot of the criticism that is lobbed towards Trump from the liberals is, oh, he's just really bad at war. Like, he's just inept when it comes to, what happened with Yemen. An actual leader wouldn't back down. So there's sort of this outrage at his ineptitude. And I say, hey, it's great to be inept at something that's awful.
Hear, hear. So there's a glimmer of hope, but just to make sure we don't leave too hopefully, I want to bring it back to Jeremy Scahill. And Jeremy Scahill, starting back in the run-up to the war in Iraq, has just an ability to crystallize the outrage and to remind us of the morality of the humanity at the front of all these things. It's fun to sort of game out what's Trump going to do, gossip between Trump and Netanyahu. But I feel like here, talking to Hasan Piker, the Twitch streamer, he really brings it back to what's at the core of everything that's happening.
The backdrop to this is burning, incinerating children and women, and targeting tents with so-called suicide drones, and bombing hospitals, and killing Hassan Slaya, one of the best journalists in Gaza, as he was receiving treatment in a burn unit where he had multiple fingers amputated because Israel tried to assassinate him by bombing a tent on April 7th. Yeah. That's the backdrop to everything that we're seeing. So I can talk about what is extraordinary about what Trump's doing, but let's never forget the moral question here. And that is that the charade we are watching, where the wealthy and powerful of the world gather together to fluff each other, pat each other on the back, sign their big weapons deals, talk about a new vision for the Middle East, while simultaneously facilitating the incineration of Palestinian children, that should be the headline on all of this. That's the thing that actually matters the most.
What more can you add to that? Well, as always, leaving you on this note, highly contemplative, highly disturbing. It's the world we live in, folks. I wish it were different. I wish we could be talking strawberries and rainbows. Hey, you guys have anything else to add, Meg, Finn?
I don't think so.
May the future bring strawberries and rainbows.
If you like what you hear, you think other people might like to hear it too, please do leave us a review. 5 stars is always appreciated. Leave us a note, leave us a voicemail on theleftunsaid.net, and we will come back at you in a week.
Until next week.
See ya.